Why do you keep reading those silly little books every night?" The voice came from the doorway, deep, sharp, coated with mockery. Sarah froze. Her hand stopped mid-page over the colourful book she was reading, her lips still forming the last soft syllables of a bedtime story. Mr. Grayson, the billionaire owner of the mansion, leaned against the doorframe, a crystal glass of wine in his hand, his designer suit perfectly pressed. His eyes flicked to the open picture book, The Very Busy Bee. He laughed, a short, cruel sound. "You're what, 30-something? And you sit here after work reading books made for toddlers. Don't tell me you're trying to educate yourself with that." Sarah's throat tightened. She looked down at the page. Bright drawings of a bee helping others, and said quietly, "It helps me sleep." "Sleep?" Grayson smirked. "You're full of surprises. Most maids binge dramas or scroll through TikTok, but you read about cartoon bees and sleepy bears. What's next? Colouring books?" She smiled faintly, not from amusement, but from the practiced calm of someone who's heard worse. "Good night, sir." Grayson shook his head and walked away, still chuckling. The echo of his laughter lingered long after his footsteps faded up the marble stairs. Sarah closed the book slowly. Her hands trembled. She brushed a tear off the page before it could fall. Then she whispered, "He'd have loved that one," and slipped the worn book into her old canvas bag. The next morning, the mansion buzzed with the usual noise: housekeepers polishing, gardeners trimming the hedges, the chef arranging breakfast for a man who rarely smiled at anyone. Grayson's assistant, Mark, entered the dining room holding a stack of documents. "Sir, the board meeting's moved to 10. The press wants a statement about your donation to the literacy fund." "Just say something inspirational," Grayson said, scrolling his phone. "Education is key, reading is power, all that nonsense. You know the drill." Mark hesitated. "You don't really believe that, do you?" Grayson glanced up. "Believe what?" "That reading changes people." Grayson gave a dry laugh. "Reading doesn't pay the bills. Hustle does. Now please, get me my coffee before our philosopher moment turns into another lecture." At the same moment, down the hall, Sarah was polishing the silverware, her eyes dull with exhaustion. She had barely slept. Every night after her shift, she went straight to her small rented room near the bus stop, took out those children's books, and read aloud into the dark, her voice always soft, always trembling on certain words. That evening, as rain beat against the windows, Grayson returned early from the city. He was irritated. A deal had fallen through, and a careless investor had cost him millions. He stormed inside, throwing his keys onto the table, when faintly, from the kitchen, he heard something. A voice, soft, gentle, reading. And the little bear said, "I'm not afraid of the dark, because Mama's light is always with me." He frowned and followed the sound. There she was again, in her uniform, sitting near the dim light of the pantry, the same old book open in her lap. He leaned against the wall, unseen for a moment, and listened. Her voice cracked slightly as she read, "Good night, stars. Good night, moon." Then she smiled faintly, closed the book and whispered, "Good night, my angel." Grayson stepped forward. "Are you reading to yourself again?" Startled, she turned, clutching the book to her chest. "I didn't hear you come in, sir. I was just finishing up." He folded his arms. "Do you honestly think that's normal, reading bedtime stories when you're alone?" Sarah's lips parted, but no words came. She forced a weak smile. "Everyone has something that keeps them going." He stared at her for a beat, then snorted, "Whatever helps you survive the boredom, I suppose." He left without waiting for a reply, but as he climbed the stairs, something about her tone, that quiet tremor, that rawness, stayed with him. He found himself pausing midway, glancing back toward the faint light of the pantry. The next morning, curiosity got the better of him. As Sarah was dusting the shelves in the library, he walked in with a cup of espresso. "So tell me," he said casually, "what's so special about those kiddie books? You trying to open a daycare or something?" Sarah looked up from the shelf. "They remind me of better days." "Better days?" He raised a brow. "I didn't think maids had time for nostalgia." There was no sarcasm in her eyes, only quiet pain. "Sometimes memories are all we have left when everything else is gone." He laughed awkwardly. "You talk like a poet. Maybe you should write your own story." "Maybe I am," she said softly, placing the duster down. The line caught him off guard. For a second he didn't know whether to laugh or apologize. Instead he said nothing, just left the room. But that one sentence lingered in his head the rest of the day. That night, Sarah missed her bus. The rain poured harder and the roads flooded. Grayson, still awake in his office, noticed her silhouette through the front window, standing under the porch light, shivering, holding her bag close. He opened the door. "You missed the bus again?" "Yes, sir. It won't come until the rain slows." He sighed. "Fine. Wait in the kitchen. You'll catch pneumonia out there." She nodded gratefully and stepped inside, dripping water onto the marble floor. As she made her way to the kitchen, a small envelope slipped out of her bag. Grayson picked it up instinctively. It was damp and half-torn, with childish drawings of stars and hearts on the corner. Inside was a hospital pass with the name Children's Intensive Care Unit printed on it. He froze. A photograph fell out. A little girl, maybe 6 or 7, lying in a hospital bed, tubes attached to her arms, but smiling brightly, holding a familiar book, The Very Busy Bee. For the first time that night, Grayson didn't move. The paper trembled slightly in his hand. When Sarah returned from the kitchen, he quickly placed the envelope back where it had fallen. She didn't notice. She just smiled politely and said, "Thank you for letting me stay inside." Grayson nodded stiffly. "No problem." As she walked away, her small figure disappearing down the hallway, his eyes went back to the photo, the little girl's eyes, same warmth, same spark. He whispered under his breath, "Who are you reading for?" Outside, the rain fell harder, almost like the world was crying with her. And inside that vast mansion, for the first time in years, something in the billionaire's chest began to ache. The morning light poured into the mansion like liquid gold, catching the dust motes dancing in the still air. Mr. Grayson sat in his office, staring at the framed photo he had secretly kept from the night before. The little girl, with the bright smile and those haunting eyes. He couldn't concentrate. Not on the quarterly reports, not on the endless phone calls, not even on the meeting about his company's charity fund, a fund that was supposed to help sick children, yet had never touched him the way that small, innocent face now did. He leaned back in his chair and muttered, "Who are you, Sarah? And who's that little girl?" Mark, his assistant, poked his head in. "Sir, the hospital called about the media tour next week. They said you'd—" Grayson interrupted. "What hospital?" "The one you donated to last year. Children's Mercy." Grayson's eyes flicked up, the same name that was printed faintly on the hospital pass from her envelope. His stomach turned. "Cancel all my meetings this afternoon, Mark." "Sir, we've got a press interview at—" I said cancel them. Mark blinked. "Right away." By early afternoon, his black Bentley rolled quietly down the long road to the hospital. For the first time, Grayson didn't care about the cameras, the press, or the image. He parked in a corner, far from the VIP entrance, and slipped in through the main lobby like an ordinary visitor. Inside, the smell of antiseptic and soft piano music filled the air. Nurses passed with calm urgency. Parents whispered near vending machines, and tiny laughter echoed faintly from the playroom at the far end. Grayson walked slowly, hands in pockets, scanning the walls lined with children's drawings, crayon hearts, smiling suns, shaky handwriting that said, "Thank you, nurses." Something stirred in him. A faint memory of a simpler time, before money, before pride. He reached the reception desk. "Excuse me," he said to the young nurse. "I'm looking for a patient, a little girl, about 6 or 7. I don't have her last name, but her mother's name is Sarah." The nurse frowned. "We have several Sarahs here. Do you know the child's full name?" He hesitated. "No, I just need to make sure she's okay." The nurse gave a polite but cautious smile. "I'm sorry, sir. We can't give out patient information without family permission." Grayson nodded. "Of course. Thank you." He turned away, feeling foolish. What was he doing? A billionaire sneaking around a hospital to check on his maid's secret life. But as he reached the corridor, he heard something, a voice, soft, familiar, and the little bee buzzed all day, helping everyone, even when he was tired. Because love never gets tired, right? He froze. It was Sarah's voice, unmistakably gentle, with that warm rhythm he'd heard in the pantry. He followed the sound slowly, careful not to draw attention. Through the small window of room 214 he saw her, sitting by a hospital bed, her uniform replaced by a simple cardigan, her hair tied back. In her lap lay the same children's book, its edges frayed and its cover faded. Beside her, hooked to soft beeping machines, was the little girl from the photo. Pale, fragile, but with a faint smile curling her lips as she listened. Sarah's voice trembled slightly as she read, and the bee whispered to his friend, "Even when you can't hear me, I'll still be right here, buzzing by your side." Tears glimmered in her eyes, but she kept reading, her thumb brushing gently over her daughter's tiny hand. Grayson stood there, rooted. His throat tightened. Something heavy pressed against his chest. The laughter he'd thrown at her, the arrogance in his tone, it all echoed back now, cruel and hollow. A nurse passed by and glanced at him. "Sir, are you visiting someone?" He cleared his throat. "No, just someone I know." The nurse smiled faintly. "That's Mrs. Sarah Thompson. Her daughter's been here 6 months. Severe trauma from a car accident. She comes every night after work, sometimes falls asleep reading to her." Grayson's breath caught. "Every night?" "Every night," the nurse nodded. "Never misses a day." When the nurse walked away, Grayson pressed his forehead lightly against the cold glass. Inside, Sarah was now fixing the little girl's blanket, humming softly, the same lullaby tone she used when she read. He didn't move for a long while. The world outside that small room felt meaningless compared to the quiet strength inside it. Finally, he turned and left. Outside, rain had started again, light and steady. As he walked back to his car, he saw families huddled under umbrellas, children laughing in puddles, and for the first time in years, he realized how loud the world was when your own heart was silent. He drove back in silence. No music, no calls, no orders barked through Bluetooth, only the faint echo of her voice reading those gentle words, "Because love never gets tired." When he reached home, the mansion felt too big, too empty. Every corner that once reflected luxury now felt like an echo chamber of guilt. He walked into the library. On the shelf, the same untouched row of books, biographies, finance, self-help, lined up like trophies. And yet, his eyes went to the small children's book she'd left accidentally the other night. He picked it up. The Very Busy Bee. The pages were worn, some taped together, the cover faintly smudged with fingerprints, small, maybe a child's. He ran his thumb along the edge and whispered, "So that's who you were reading for." He sat down, opened the first page, and started reading aloud. His voice was awkward at first, uncertain, until he reached the line Sarah had read days ago. "Even when you can't hear me, I'll still be right here." Something broke inside him. He shut the book and leaned forward, pressing his hands to his face. The quiet sound that came out wasn't laughter. It was the kind of sound a man makes when pride finally shatters. For the first time in years, billionaire Michael Grayson cried. The next morning, Sarah arrived at the mansion with swollen eyes and a small paper cup of hospital coffee still warm in her hands. She greeted no one, only slipped off her coat and went straight to the laundry room. From the upstairs balcony, Grayson watched her move like a shadow, slower, quieter than usual. He'd spent half the night thinking about the girl in that hospital bed, about the small fingers curled around the edge of a picture book. Before sunrise, he had made one phone call, not to his lawyer, not to his accountant, but to the hospital's charity office. Now an envelope waited in his desk drawer. The full payment for the child's medical care, made anonymously under a program name that no one would trace. That afternoon, Sarah heard the head nurse's voice on the phone. "Miss Thompson, the remainder of your daughter's bill has been covered." Completely. She nearly dropped the phone. What? By who? The donor wished to stay anonymous, the nurse said kindly. They also requested we move your daughter to a private recovery room. She's stable today, even responded to light. Sarah's knees weakened. She sat on the floor and wept, clutching the phone to her chest. When she returned to work the next day, her eyes were still red, but a faint, fragile smile touched her lips. Grayson pretended not to notice. He kept his distance, but small changes followed. He began to speak softer. He said, "Please." He asked about her day, not out of formality, but curiosity. One evening, she found him in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, trying to make tea. "You don't drink tea," she said, surprised. He gave a half smile. "I do now. Someone told me it helps you sleep." She smiled back. "It does." Days turned to weeks. At the hospital, her daughter Ava began to breathe on her own. The doctors called it a miracle. At the mansion, Grayson began to listen when people spoke to him. Really listen. He donated quietly to the children's reading program, never attaching his name again. Then, one Sunday, Sarah entered the mansion carrying a small bundle in her arms, a delicate girl with short curls and bright, wondering eyes. Ava. "Sir?" Sarah said softly. "Ava wanted to thank you for letting me take a few extra days off." Grayson turned, almost startled. "This is Ava?" The child nodded shyly, holding out a tiny hand clutching a book. The Very Busy Bee. He knelt down, his voice trembling. "That's a good one. I've read it." Ava's eyes widened. "Mommy reads it to me every night." He smiled. "She's a wonderful storyteller." The little girl giggled and looked up at her mother. Sarah's eyes glistened. "She's alive because someone out there cared." Grayson opened his mouth, then closed it. He only said, "I'm glad she's okay." That evening, after they left, he stood alone in the silent mansion. The rain began again, tapping against the tall windows. He opened the same old book, read the last line aloud, and whispered, "Even when you can't hear me, I'll still be right here." He placed the book on the window ledge, not as a decoration but as a reminder. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness can rewrite someone's entire story. You never know what battles the people around you are quietly fighting. So choose empathy before judgment. Think about it. The stranger you smile at today might be standing at their breaking point, waiting for 1 ounce of kindness to keep going. If this story touched your heart, hit like. Share it with someone who needs hope today, and tell us in the comments what part moved you most. Don't forget to subscribe to Black Saga, where every story reminds us that compassion is the greatest wealth of all.